So we are so thrilled to bring these next guests to the Rail Talk studio here to break some major news. Appreciate you guys coming on this platform to do it. The esteemed former state senator of Kentucky, Damon Thayer, and the general manager of Ocala stud, David O'Farrell. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be on.
Great to have you. So the breaking news is that you guys, in conjunction with John Green, have started the Thoroughbred Racing Initiative. This is a huge deal because you guys are going to fight in an organized way against the decoupling bill in Florida, and then hopefully eventually we'll broaden it out to take on some more of the fights that racing is facing in an existential way. Damon, I'll start with you. How did this come about, and then what is the short-term focus of this new initiative?
Well, when the news came out about the decoupling bill a few weeks ago, Eric Hamelbeck, who's the president of the National HBPA, reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to write an op-ed because the situation in Florida right now is very similar to what happened in Kentucky in the fall of 2020, when after 10 years of positive Supreme Court and district court decisions about historical horse racing, our Supreme Court in Kentucky flipped its position and said that HHR required an act of the legislature to make it legal. So we were really in a crisis mode and had to get everybody together on the same page in a very short period of time to try to pass a bill. This is a similar situation where we have to get everybody together in a short period of time to try to kill a bill. So I wrote the op-ed, and Mark Cassie reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to get on a call with John and David and Dr. Barry Eisman and talk about being involved in a Florida initiative to, in the short term, attempt to defeat the decoupling bill, and in the long term, help be a convening authority to figure out a way forward for Florida racing and its really important breeding industry. And so David and John and the guys formed the Thoroughbred Racing Initiative, and we're here breaking the news on your podcast today.
Yeah, and I guess one of the important things, Damon, aside from taking on, some of the powers that be in Tallahassee, is just to remind everybody, and David, I'm going to ask you this, remind everybody, the importance of the fact that it's a new organization, it's a new initiative, but we're not looking to replace anybody. As a matter of fact, David, you've actually spoken to a lot of groups and organizations in Florida because this impacts Florida first and then globally the industry. What feedback are you getting from some of the powers that be and some of these other organizations that are now joining forces with us?
It's all positive. It's been good. We're just trying to bolster our efforts and band together and bring as many resources to the table as we can to try to combat this bill. This bill is obviously seriously impactful for the future of Florida, but it also has national consequences as well. So, we feel like we can bring something to the table, and we can help the efforts that have already been established. And we're ready to put up the good fight.
What does that fight look like organizationally, structurally? Like you got boots on the ground. You mentioned that you were in Tallahassee. What does that look like right now?
Yeah, so I'm here with OBS representatives. We came last night and we met with Senate President Ben Albritton. There was about 15 OBS directors, employees, executives that filled the room, and we were granted 30 minutes of his time, and we took about an hour and 20 minutes of it that he spent with us, which was really nice. I think we got our message across. We were able to tell our story, and it was very productive. And we met with 4 other state senators this morning. So between OBS and the FTBOA and the new TRI, Thoroughbred Racing Initiative, we're going to all try to row in the same direction and try to beat this bill.
And Damon, what are you seeing from Kentucky as far as the interest from some of the farms and some of the organizations that are outside of Florida? You and I are technically outsiders because we don't live in Florida, but we both have spoken about the importance of decoupling and beating this bill. When you talk to people in Kentucky, what are the effects that they're seeing?
Well, everybody in Kentucky is very focused on this because Florida is incredibly important to not only the national racing and breeding ecosystem, but it's of critical importance to Kentucky. we've got dozens of Kentucky trainers in Florida right now for the winter, either at Gulfstream Park or one of the training centers or at Tampa. A lot of our horses get broken at training centers in Marion County. So it's not only the $3.25 billion economic impact the horse industry has on Florida and the 33,500 jobs that it has in Florida, but it has really what we hope is an unbreakable chain on the effect on what's happening here in Kentucky. I mean, Florida is one of the most important racing and breeding states. I think it's 20% of the handle, 10% of the national race days, and it's of critical importance. So look, I'm a racing fan at heart. I was fortunate that for 22 years in the Kentucky State Senate, 12 as Senate Majority Floor Leader, I was in a position to help my adopted home state solidify its position in the national ecosystem. But I'm a racing fan first. I want racing to survive and thrive everywhere. I mean, I counted it up this weekend. I made my first visit to the fairgrounds ever. I'll be in Tampa next week to go to Tampa Bay Downs. I've been to something like 70 racetracks across the world, and
Wow.
I want racing to thrive everywhere. As a fan, I'm also an owner. I'm involved with CJ Thoroughbreds. We've got a couple horses in Florida right now with Dale Romans. We've got a nice filly making her first start this weekend with Brendan Walsh. Her name is Dance to Remember. I got to name her because I'm a fan of the Eagles, and that's a line from my favorite song, Hotel California.
Yep.
So we're invested in Florida racing too. Our partnership as an owner, we've got our nice 3-year-old Keep It Easy pointing for the Fountain of Youth, and it's as a racing fan, we need Florida to not just survive but thrive.
Right. And David, as far as what you're seeing, I mean, you're in Tallahassee, you're meeting with elected officials. We've spoken to other groups in the industry. I've been shocked and amazed at how much of a rallying cry this issue has been for various groups. What are you most surprised about as far as the groups that are either lining up to work with us or that you've had audiences with so far?
Well, I think everybody understands what's at stake here. Florida is hugely important to the racing ecosystem nationwide, as Damon illustrated a minute ago. We're in a position, we're at a very good a very good place in Ocala, Marion County. We have all the infrastructure, we have the great weather. The winter circuits thrive in South Florida due to the weather. And it's something that's hugely important for us going forward.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to ask, you guys are obviously advocates for racing as a whole. Florida is the current fight, and that's the 5-alarm fire right now that we have to put out. But there's other fires, around the country, and there's other existential crises. Like we look at the situation that Santa Anita's in, and same ownership as Gulfstream Park, same kind of sword of Damocles hanging over their head, and whether or not they're going to still be racing 3 or 4 years from now. Understanding that you guys have to focus your resources on this current fight in Florida. Damon, can you just tell the audience if there's a plan to broaden this out and start to combat these issues across the country?
Well, that's a great question. And the short answer is yes. That's why David and John and the guys decided to name it Thoroughbred Racing Initiative. Our first fight is in Florida, but we want to be able to expand this in other places if necessary. We want to be a convening authority, a collaborative effort to bring all the parties together to seek success in racing states. And here's the bottom line, Joe, over the next 5 to 10 years. The states where the racing and breeding industry have a good relationship with their state legislators are the places where racing is going to survive and thrive. And if you look around, you can, and I'll probably leave somebody out, but Kentucky, obviously, Maryland, the state is investing huge there in building a new Pimlico and a new training center. New York, obviously, $500 million to build the new Belmont Park. Arkansas, Virginia, Indiana, and we hope Florida. And to be fair, in Florida, the legislature has been very supportive over the last decade, the last several years, with the FTBOA and our mutual friend Lonnie Powell leading the way. Florida has had a number of wins for the thoroughbred side of the business. So we just want to continue that, because it's important that we have that strong relationship in Tallahassee. David is there today, met with legislators yesterday, is going to meet with more today. The states where the industry has a good relationship with legislators is where racing is going to survive and thrive. Right now, that doesn't seem to be the case in California, but I'm a believer in it's never too late. And I have the blueprint for this in Kentucky.
Exactly.
And during my last 3 years in the Kentucky General Assembly, we passed 5 bills to help stabilize and improve the racing and breeding industry in Kentucky. I mean, you can only make a legal sports bet at a racetrack in Kentucky. I mean, obviously, we've got online, you can bet on your phone, but the only place where you can make a brick and mortar sports bet in Kentucky is at a racetrack or an OTB. Mm-hmm. So, that's just another example. We had a huge win in 2021 where we formalized the legalization of historical horse racing machines. And then we came back a year later after a year's worth of hearings on, and we passed a flat tax for horse racing bets in Kentucky. And you all know the results. I mean, we're running $85,000 maiden races at Turfway right now. Mm-hmm. They're going to be $110,000 at Keeneland, $120,000 at Churchill Downs. So I believe this model can be picked up, laid down in other state capitals, and achieve success. Luckily, in Florida, because of the efforts of OBS and the FTBOA and the Tampa HPPA, there is a good relationship between the industry and legislators. Just the fact that David's there having these meetings shows that they're willing to listen to what we have to say. And that was the case in Kentucky, but everybody has to come together. And we did that in Kentucky: horsemen, owners, trainers, breeders, tracks, because the easiest thing for a legislator to do is to say no, right? Especially if an industry is divided and has different messages, because legislators are hit with hundreds of messages every day. And the easiest thing to do is to say, no, I don't have time to deal with this. Believe me, I did it for 22 years. And right now, I'm really optimistic about our chances of killing this bill in the Senate because of the unanimity the industry is showing. Like John said, this started less than 2 weeks ago. I was in Austin, Texas. I'm working with a similar coalition down there. I got off the plane. I got a call from Mark Cassie. He said, "Hey, I read your op-ed. Can you help us in Florida?" And I said, "Hey, put me in, coach."
Right. Yep. And David, we've gotten a great groundswell of support so far. If people want to either throw their efforts in or make a donation or contribution, we'll put the graphics up on the screen. But what's the best way for people at home or or other organizations that want to get in line with us? What's the best way for them to get in touch with us?
The best way to get in touch would be either to reach out to myself or Damon or Mark or Barry or yourself. And also, this is like everything else. It takes money. We need contributions. We need financial support. But we feel like we're making the right inroads. We're going to make an impact. And I think we're going to get the job done.
No, absolutely. I hope so. And listen, I wanted to ask one more question of Damon, just because you have the experience of fighting these battles in the legislature. In Kentucky, I know there's a heavy lift. I'm not trying to minimize any of the work that you guys did. Kentucky is the home of horse racing, and it's the horse capital of the world. So I feel like there had to at least be a more receptive ear in Kentucky than Florida or some of these other states, but maybe I'm wrong. Can you talk about like the challenge of doing it outside of Kentucky where there isn't necessarily a natural connection to the sport?
Yeah, that's a great question. Also, as a follow-up from before, we will be launching a website, thoroughbredracinginitiative.com, spelled out, thoroughbredracinginitiative.com. And people who wish to support our efforts, can make a contribution on that website. Now, to your question, it does appear that it should have been easier than it was. It was not a slam dunk to pass this HHR bill, Joe. Once you get outside of Lexington, Louisville, and Northern Kentucky, the support for horse racing and breeding drops off in the more socially conservative parts of the state. So we have 31 Republicans in the Kentucky State Senate, only 7 Democrats. In order to get the bill passed, I had to reach out to the Democrat caucus in order to get the requisite number of votes to pass. And it was nip and tuck. At the end, out of those 31 Republicans, 15 of them voted yes. And then I needed 20 votes to pass it. And I got the 7 Democrats to support it, and we passed the bill with 22 votes. But it was nip and tuck, and it was very nerve-wracking. I've got the scars to show from
Right.
But one thing that I think is a good illustration, I had 2 senators from Eastern Kentucky who don't have a racetrack in or near their district and no breeding farms, but they saw what can happen to a signature industry when it goes down. And that would be the coal industry, which is incredibly important to Eastern Kentucky. And after the Obama administration cracked down on fossil fuels, we saw a tremendous decrease in coal mining jobs here in Kentucky. And those 2 guys came to me, and they were under absolutely rigorous pressure from preachers and churches back home to vote no. And they said, Damon, we're not going to stand by and let another signature industry die on our watch. And we're voting yes. And it was Senator Philip Wheeler from Pike County. And unfortunately, the late Johnny Turner, he passed away last fall from Harlan County. No racetracks, no breeding farms, but they voted yes because they did not want to see another signature industry die on their watch. And that got me to 15 Republicans. And I mean, you can do the math. I mean, those guys are heroes to me. And they really stepped up. And, you know, sometimes it takes that. Look, I'm a very partisan guy. I was the Senate Majority Leader, led the way for my party for 12 years. I've engaged in a lot of bare knuckle brawls with the opposition. However, I'm friends with them all. And there are some times when you have to get bipartisan agreement, and that's what we did. And you also have to hope that you get people who are not only from the horse-centric regions of your state, but also people who may not be as affected by that, but are willing to take the big view about is what's right for your state. So, yes, people were more open to it, Joe, but it wasn't as easy as you thought. It was the hardest fight of my political life, I can tell you that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And Joe, the other thing is, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in. Part of the reason why we're doing this obviously is for the love of the industry, the love of the sport, and the importance that horse racing and breeding is to Florida, and that's a big part of it. Another part of it also is that First has done a lot of things with regard to getting themselves in a position where they are right now, and a lot of it has been to the detriment of the people who make a living at the racetrack, the owners, trainers especially, and their employees. And from a moral standpoint, the group also just didn't think it was right. We just didn't think it was the right thing for them to constantly take advantage of the horsemen in the situation that they're in right now, to the extent where basically the horsemen were held hostage to have to, get out of decoupling's way in order for them to be able to have workman's comp insurance, which is like a necessity in order to run any business. So it really, we saw it as an injustice. We saw it as it was an unfair fight. And I think that that's also part of the reason why so many people are coming aboard and wanting to be a part of this. So David, just to dovetail on what you were saying, also, we'll put it up on the screen. If people want to go to the website, it's Thoroughbred Racing Initiative. There's an email there, contact@thoroughbredracinginitiative.com, where they can get in touch with us. But you're right. The best way to get in touch with anybody on the board is to call them or reach out to them directly. We're all very accessible, and we're all very involved. We've only been doing this for 2 weeks now, but we've made huge headway as far as who else is involved, the amount of money that we're raising, the people, the profile that we're doing, and it's just the right cause. You know, I'm all about trying to do the right thing for the industry. And again, even though I'm not a Floridian, by address, I feel like I'm a Floridian by nature, just because this is the right fight. If you're going to pick a fight and a battle to stand up and say, this is what I want to throw my efforts into, this is the one.
Yeah, well, it's key, like, honestly, because, horsemen's groups are kind of the only other outlet for this kind of organization, but horsemen have to work with management.
Right.
Like, they have that push and pull with management, and it's great to have other parties from slightly outside of that close-knit relationship to put pressure on management. David, you have a family-run farm in Ocala, and it's one of the tops, I think, pound for pound, one of the top stallion farms in the country.
Absolutely.
Just talk to me about, I think the thing that people don't realize is that it's these kind of decisions and these kind of like vague threats to close racetracks. They don't just affect the here and the now. They affect people like you making breeding decisions, because the foals that you're breeding right now are not going to be on the racetrack until 2028. Talk about how this push by First Racing has kind of affected your business and the business of stallion and breeding farms.
Just the threat of the decoupling bill has put a halt to some commerce. The stallion sales have been slow. People are making decisions. There's other breeding programs elsewhere that are lucrative. And people that breed are long-term investors. It takes 3 years to make a racehorse soup to nuts. So, when you are under the threat that Gulfstream Park won't be in operation in 3 years or 4 years, or the possibility that they could close at any time, it creates a lot of uncertainty. So, it slows down commerce, and, it puts everybody in crisis mode. So, we're kind of dealing with that right now. I'm a third generation horseman. Next year will be the 70th year that Ocala Stud will be in business. And we're very proud of that. And not only are we proud of the horses that we've raised over the years, but more importantly, we've raised a lot of good people. We have a lot of employees that have been with us a really long time. We have 2 employees that have been with us for 50 years, about 6 of them that have been with us 30 years plus, and about 12 that are 20 years plus. And so we've raised a lot of families. This jeopardizes a lot of people's livelihoods. And it really, this bill, it really benefits one entity, a Canadian entity, and comes at the expense of an entire industry with a huge economic impact.
Yep. Like you said, like John said, the injustice of that really hits home. And I think a lot of people in Florida are rightfully asking, like, who's going to be our advocate? And I'm so glad that you guys are all stepping up to be their advocates. And hopefully we can reproduce these efforts across the country, because we need organization. And, Damon, with your experience in the legislature, I think it is super valuable. And David, with your skin in the game, couldn't think of more skin in the game than you have and Ocala Stud has. So thank you guys for doing this. Thank you for breaking the news on the show. And we'd love to have you back on to give us some updates.
Happy to do it anytime. And, to follow up on something David said, the horse breeding business is a marketplace.
Right.
Marketplaces hate uncertainty. And what First Racing Stronach Group has done here is introduce uncertainty into a marketplace. And to follow up on what David said, are we really going to let a Canadian company hold an American industry hostage? 33,500 jobs, $3.2 billion economic impact. Is that? I don't think that really goes along with what America is about these days. And so I'm in for the fight. When I retired from the legislature, I put my sword away, but I promised I would keep it sharp. And it turns out I'm being called back into battle, and I'm ready to unsheath my sword. I can tell you that right now, to help save this Florida racing industry.
We need it. We need it. Thank you, guys.